I just pressed the Let's Go Live button, so let's wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plain of the internet. Before we go ahead and get started, we'd like to make sure we're coming in loud and clear on the Rumbles, on the YouTubes, on the Twitters. We were on the locals and our Telegrams. It looks like we are alive and well, so let's get right to it, shall we? Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun deep in downtown Phoenix, Arizona. And today we are talking about closings. We've got closing arguments in day 8 of the Trump trial. And remember, we picked up last week with Donald Trump not presenting any defense at all. And so that means he's going to be delivering an oomph today in court. We're expecting to hear from his defense team during closing arguments. Now, before we get into closing arguments, we had questions about whether Trump was going to be testifying. We know the answer to that. We've got new filings that came in. Roberta Kaplan, the lawyer for E. Jean Carroll, is tattletaling on Donald Trump. Said, "Judge, have you looked at his Truth Social posts recently?" Well, if you haven't, I've attached some documents as exhibits, sending them on over into the court. You see a couple Truth Social posts are still up there. And so we'll see what the Trump team says about it and what the lawyer said about it. Now we're getting down to the wire on jury instructions. And so there was a letter sent in by Ms. Carroll's lawyer to the judge, and we have a response to that letter from Joe Tacopina. This was all about what language can be put in front of the jurors to tell the jurors, these are the rules you have to follow when I instruct you to basically convict Trump. So all of that we'll take a look at. There was, of course, a lot of clips that came out over the weekend, courtesy of our friend Inner City Press, and I was a little agitated. He didn't get much credit for this over the weekend, but he should have, because he's been filing motions to make all of this stuff public. It became public, and then a lot of the media just took it and ran with it. No credit to him at all. But we do have the clips. Full deposition is now online and available. You can watch the full thing, but I pulled 4 different clips. One where he's explaining the grab 'em clip, which is probably the worst of the clips out there. The other was he talking about not my first choice. Now, we read that on the show during the live trial tweets, and that was a ton of fun. And then a couple other fun clips where Trump is saying this whole thing's a hoax, and she is a sick woman. And I agree with him on those things. So let's take a look at this trial thread, which also will be coming up courtesy of our friend, as I mentioned, Inner City Press. All of that today. It's going to be a full day of Trump trial stuff. It's day 8. We're at the end game here. And so we'll see tomorrow. They're going to hand the full case off to the jury. They'll start deliberating, and we'll see how much time it takes them to return a verdict. But my friends, if you want to be a part of the show as we get into this, we'd love to have you on our community, at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We do morning streams, member only, behind the scenes kind of, chit chats. And so we did that this morning, where we got to get into some other stuff that we just can't get into here. And so we'd love it if you joined us, watchingthewatchers.locals.com, or became a member on YouTube. And when you join us on YouTube, make sure you also grab the private Telegram group so you can join us there as well. Now, we've got final closing arguments to attend to, and we got to be properly nutrified and fortified with our field of greens. And so make sure, my friends, you're opening up a new tab in your browser and you're going to fieldofgreens.com, because we would all like to lose some of those leftover pandemic pounds. But, how sick are you of all those ads for weight loss pills and fad diets? We've all been there. We've all done that. And we know they don't work, but you know it does. Eating 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, the healthy kind, and you do that and the weight would probably just fall off. But look, vegetables, not a fan, and who's got time to prepare that every day? Not me. But no worries. Let's talk Field of Greens. Field of Greens is a science-backed formula, very specific fruits and vegetables you won't find in any other product. Proper nutrition reboots your metabolism so you can burn calories faster and lose weight a healthier way. And Field of Greens is the only brand backed by a better health promise. Yes, you'll look healthier and feel healthier fast, but the greater proof is going to come at your next checkup when your doctor says, wow, you've lost weight. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. And so let's get you started. Go on over to fieldofgreens.com. Don't forget to use code Robert when you check out so that you can save 15% on your first order over there. Visit fieldofgreens.com. Remember, the vegetables want to be eaten, and this product has all sorts of amazing stuff in there. Antioxidant blends, metabolic blends. Read the ingredients when you go there. You go, well, this is crazy. It's all natural, real organic superfood. Fieldofgreens.com. Save 15% with code Robert. Now, we are going over to the Trump mind map, and if you want to follow along at home, you can. You can go to spotlightlawyer.com/Trump. If you're having problems with that, put a www in front of it. I see a couple people are already poking around here and following along. If you are, we're on day 8, and if you open this up in a browser, you can navigate all of the other days. We've gone through all of them here at length. Clips, notes, court documents, court filings, all available, spotlightlawyer.com/Trump. And today we are getting into day 8. And so the first part of this conversation was about whether Donald Trump would come in and testify. Remember, he was over in Scotland and he released a video that we played last week where he said, I might actually come back to trial to testify. And the judge on that date said, all right, Donald, we're going to give you until Sunday night at 5 p.m. You see this right here in this court order. The court is granting Trump until 5 p.m. on 5/7/2023 to file a motion to reopen his case. Well, it turns out Donald Trump didn't file that motion. And so we didn't see any new evidence of him wanting to testify. And so since there was no new filing, this whole thing just went away and the case moved forward. They showed up in court today and they had their closing arguments after a brief period of deliberation. But there wasn't any absence of filings. There were a bunch of documents that we will take a look at now because E. Jean Carroll's lawyer, Roberta Kaplan, submitted a letter to the judge tattling on Donald Trump for keeping posts up about the trial on his Truth Social page. And you can take a look at a couple of these exhibits. She attached them as Exhibit A. Donald Trump posted this on April 26, and he posted another one on April 26 at 9:10 a.m. So the first one was at 8:51. The second one was at 9:10. And this is still up. And that's what Miss Kaplan is so upset about. So she sent a letter in saying, Your Honor, I found something and you need to know about it. Submitted this May 7th, 2 pages, coming from her office out of New York. Says, Dear Judge Kaplan, she's, tattletaling her. We write on behalf of E. Jean Carroll to update the court about 2 statements that Trump made about this case on Truth Social in April 26, the second day of trial in this action. And we were here, we were covering that. We saw those posts and we saw the judge scold Joe Tacopina in trial about those posts. He told him, hey, talk to your client about it. She says, Your Honor, we flagged these posts to Your Honor as soon as we learned of them back on that day, raising our concern that Trump was improperly making extrajudicial statements about inadmissible and prejudicial evidence. Your Honor, the judge acknowledged this concern, stating that Trump seemed to be basically endeavoring certainly to speak to his public, but more troublesome to the jury in this case about stuff that has no business being spoken about. Also saying, the judge said, this seems highly inappropriate. The next day, Mr. Trump's lawyer, counsel Joe Tacopina, reported that he had spoken with his client about the post. He says that he represented that the post would be taken down in short order. Footnote 1. She says, well, Mr. Trump has not discussed the trial on his Truth Social account since April 26. He has spoken with reporters about the case, stating, among other things, that he planned to go back to New York and confront Carroll. He said, this woman is a disgrace. And she's referencing the Politico article from May 4, 2023. She says, to be clear, we have no doubt that Mr. Tacopina spoke to his client about these posts and sincerely believed the posts would be taken down. Unfortunately, she says, the posts remain available on Truth Social as of the time of this filing. And for the reasons previously stated, we continue to object to Trump's public statements about the evidence held to be inadmissible at trial and remain concerned about the prejudice that his statements may have already caused our client, E. Jean Carroll, in these proceedings. Very sincerely, respectfully submitted, yours, Roberta A. Kaplan, lawyer for E. Jean Carroll, tattletaling on these posts still being up. And the posts still are up, and we learned that apparently Tacopina told the judge that he thought the post would be removed. So now we get confusion about the order from the judge. Did the judge just say, all right, don't post anything more? Or did the judge say, okay, take the post down? We don't know. And we don't know exactly what Joe Tacopina responded with, whether he said, yes, Your Honor, I talked to him, he won't post anymore, or yes, Your Honor, I talked to him, he'll delete the posts. But either way, Donald Trump did make additional statements about this case, and I was also surprised to hear those statements last week when he said the following when he was in Scotland. And I don't disagree with his sentiments, but he is dealing with a very agitated judge. This is what Trump said.
I have to leave Ireland and I have to leave Scotland, where I have great properties. I have to leave early. I don't have to, but I choose to.
Will you attend the trial, Mr. President?
I'll probably attend. It's a disgrace that it's allowed to happen. It's a false accusation against a rich guy, or in my case, against a famous, rich, and political person that's leading the polls by 40 points. And I have to go back for a woman that made a false accusation about me, and I have a judge who's extremely hostile. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to confront this one. This woman is a disgrace, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen in our country. That's totally false. It was fake. She's a fake. She wrote in a book she's a Democrat. We have a rough judge. We have a judge that doesn't like me much, appointed by Bill Clinton. And he's a guy that doesn't like me much. He's, I guess, not allowing the coat that they wanted to put into evidence. Once we said, yes, put it into evidence, they said, oh, we don't want to do that. It's a disgrace, but I have to do it. That's part of life.
And we didn't know whether Joe Tacopina had actually heard that when he was in court on that day. And so that's why the judge, I think, gave him until 5, because there was some question about whether Donald Trump would come back on Sunday and actually show up and attend to this trial, as he just hinted that he might do. So we get there. Now, the letter went out in addition to that video, which the plaintiff is referencing. She also submitted these 2 exhibits. And Exhibit A was this truth. And remember, this was posted at 8:51 in the morning. And that was before trial started, if this is on Eastern time. Trump said this: the E. Jean Carroll case, Miss Bergdorf Goodman, is a made-up scam. Her lawyer is a political operative financed by a big political donor that they said didn't exist. They want him to delete this tweet. They don't want this up there. They don't want anybody to hear about it, I guess. I don't know why. Her lawyer is a political operative financed by a big political donor that they said didn't exist. Yeah, and so remember, this is Reid Hoffman. If you want to go to the spotlightlawyer.com/Trump mind map, you can see that. We have that whole relationship detailed out now. There's good evidence of that. As you see, Reid Hoffman is this guy here, the same guy who admitted to visiting Jeffrey Epstein's island, even though he claims to care about victims of sexual abuse, still hanging around with Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein got convicted. Curious. He was the guy who, according to a letter sent by Roberta Kaplan to Alina Abba, Trump's lawyer, was financing a lot of this litigation. And we know that George Conway met the plaintiff and encouraged her to litigate this and connected her with Roberta Kaplan. So everything that Trump said there is true, as far as I can tell, based on the filings in the court. But they don't want this tweet up, or this truth up. Just look at her CNN interview before and after the commercial break, like a different person. She said there was a dress using the old Monica Lewinsky stuff. Then she didn't want to produce it. The dress should be allowed to be a part of the case. This is a fraudulent and false story. It's a witch hunt. So that's the first post. Then there's another post here, Exhibit B. They also want Trump to delete this. Now, he posted this one a little bit after, right at 9:10 a.m., which is presumably after the day of trial starts that day. And I do believe this was the second day of trial after the jury was selected. So it was the first full day of actual trial, right? These were the two tweets. You see them under in day 2. And Eric Trump also made a post, but he deleted his post. So Eric Trump actually deleted that one, but Trump's are still up. In this one, he says, they got caught lying. The Miss Bergdorf Goodman case, financed by a big political donor that they tried to hide. Same guy, Reid Hoffman. Does anyone believe that I would take a then almost 60-year-old woman that I didn't know from the front door of a very crowded department store, with me being very well known, to put it mildly, into a tiny dressing room and what her? She didn't scream. There's no witnesses. Nobody ever saw this. She never made a complaint. If I was seen there with a woman, there'd be big press. Total scam. So he posted that at 9:10, and that is what Ms. Kaplan's very upset about. So, Your Honor, these posts are still up here. Can you please take them down? They might impact the jury, and they're in violation of your order. So, all right. That's who is representing Ms. Carroll. And that was not the only set of filings. There was more. Back over at spotlightlawyer.com/Trump, there was a debate about some jury instructions. So Ms. Kaplan also submitted another letter. She said this on May 5th. Dear Judge, we write on behalf of our client, Ms. Carroll, to respectfully propose a jury instruction related to a line of questioning about an episode of Law & Order, SVU. You remember that one? It was the Law & Order Bergdorf Goodman meme. During Trump's cross-examination of Carroll, Tacopina asked several questions and introduced a single document relating to an episode of SVU. However, they say, as we'll demonstrate below, there is no evidence in the record that Trump could properly rely upon to make arguments to the jury about the existence or plot of this supposed Law & Order SVU episode. Neither the Trump or team introduced nor Carroll's testimony, neither the email Trump introduced nor Carroll's testimony provides such a basis. So they say, starting with the email, Trump, and we can't really see these exhibits and stuff, so we're piecing this together just by the numbers and stuff. It says, starting with the email, Trump offered and the court received DXCK during a cross. That contained an email from someone named Grace Brophy to Carroll, June 23, 2019, after Carroll had publicized her account of the assault and brought her lawsuit. In the email, Brophy purported to describe a Law & Order SVU episode. Asked Carroll if she was aware of it. Carroll replied to the email that same day and confirmed that she had never seen the episode. So she says, yeah, that sounds this Bergdorf Goodman story. Sounds like a show I watch called Law & Order. You ever hear of it? Like, no. The only part of the email that discussed the existence of the plot of the episode is the part written by Brophy. This part of the email is thus an out-of-court statement. It's hearsay. Under a straightforward application of the rules of evidence, it constitutes hearsay. This means that Trump cannot rely on this to argue the existence or the contents of his episodes. So not only anything that was within the episode, but also the episode itself. Can't mention it at all. And the jury cannot use the email for the truth of its contents. In other words, the jury cannot consider the email to be evidence of the Law & Order episode or the plot. Saying, so if they can't use the email as a basis to get it in, then they have to use her testimony. When she was questioned about the email on the stand, Carroll testified. She says, I haven't seen it and I have yet to see it. When questioned about the episode again during a redirect, Carroll reiterated that she had never seen or heard of it before she wrote her book and had no idea what actually happens in that episode of television. She said she was not making up her accusation based on a TV show. So, Your Honor, as this testimony demonstrates, Carroll has no personal knowledge about this episode. Of course, Carroll cannot testify as to the subject matter of a hearsay statement. She has no knowledge about it, so she can't testify about it. There's some rules. To be sure, Trump was entitled to ask Carroll about her knowledge about the episode, and the jury's entitled to evaluate her answers in her state of mind. But there's no basis to make closing arguments concerning the existence or the plot of the show. So they want this special instruction inserted into the jury instructions. This is coming from Roberta Kaplan. Says, during cross-examination of Miss Carroll, they want the jurors to hear this, right? This is for you now. During the cross-examination of Miss Carroll, you heard several questions relating to an episode of Law & Order SVU. What has been admitted into evidence in connection with those questions is an email to Miss Carroll in which someone purported to describe the episode and she responded to the claim. Miss Carroll testified, among other things, that she's never seen the episode, never previously heard of it, and she does not watch the purported show. I instruct you that you may not consider the email you saw as evidence of whether the episode exists or whether the plot is in the email, whether it's relevant. You may consider the email as evidence that someone wrote to Miss Carroll telling her that there was an episode, but not as evidence about whether there is, in fact, is any such episode. You hear these lawyers, man? You can only know that this was an email about an episode. There was such an episode in a writing, but not as evidence about the fact that there is an episode. Jurors like, what? Huh. So I guess this person who's sending Carroll a letter is just an email, is just a crazy person because she's talking about a non-existent Law and Order episode. It's amazing. Yeah. Beyond that, you may consider the email only to the extent, if any, you believe Miss Carroll's response bears on her state of mind, on her credibility. They should probably just add in here, you know, and Carroll is amazing and we love her and she's very credible and please render a verdict in her favor, signed Miss Kaplan. And so that is the letter. They don't want to talk about this SVU plot, which is strange because that means there's probably something to it. I wonder, do we play that? I've seen the clip, but I'm wondering if we've played it here. And I was going to see if I could grab it quickly. I think we did play it. Let's see if we can grab this real quick, if this one works.
In a public.
Yeah, this I believe is it. This is the clip, and it's recorded on a phone.
In a public place.
Yes, there was one, a bit plain, and it was not her fantasy, it was mine.
Okay.
Yeah. Role play took place in the dressing room of Bergdorf's. While she was trying on lingerie, I would burst in.
Hold on. Yeah. When did you and she have your date?
6 weeks ago, maybe.
Burst in at Bergdorf's. She'd put on lingerie.
Role play took place in the dressing room of Bergdorf's.
Bergdorf.
While she was trying on lingerie, I would burst in.
Hold on.
Yeah, while she was trying on lingerie, I would burst in there. And, you know, we do our role play thing. And I don't know what the rest happened in that episode. I guess that guy must have, you know, left and run for president or something. I don't know. Strange. But anyways, so that is the letter from Roberta Kaplan over to the judge asking to keep a certain portion of evidence out. Joe Tacopina responded. Let's see what he says. He writes on May 6th, Your Honor, on behalf of Donald Trump, we write to respond to Miss Kaplan's letter requesting a limiting jury instruction about this Law and Order episode. The request is untimely and it's unmeritorious and thus it should be denied. He says during cross-examination, this exhibit was admitted into evidence without objection at the time. The exhibit begins with an email from a third party to Miss Carroll sent after she had gone public with her allegations against Trump to warn her that to quote, warn her that a Law and Order SVU episode has a character, a judge, speaking of a fantasy that he attacks a woman in a Bergdorf Goodman's dressing room in a lingerie department. The TV show apparently aired in 2012, and the plot, of course, is virtually identical to the claims made by Miss Carroll in this case. In response to the email, Carroll said, "I haven't seen it, but this happens all the time with Law and Order stories. Also, there are 200 scripted shows a year on TV. This kind of thing is bound to show up. Indeed, I'm surprised this sort of plot is not seen more often." Before the exhibit was introduced into evidence, Miss Carroll's counsel requested a sidebar based upon a question concerning the episode, not our exhibit. They had a question about the show, not our email and our document. At the sidebar, Trump's team says, "We described the exhibit to the court, and in response, they once again objected under relevancy and 403 standards, but not hearsay," which they're trying to do now. So they're saying it's overly harmful. It's not helpful at all. It's really damaging to their case if this gets in, and it's not relevant anyways. Now they're trying to bring up it's hearsay. They're saying which plaintiff is now raised belatedly for the first time right here in front of you, Your Honor. Regardless of the grounds underlying the objections, the court overruled them. Says, no, I will allow it. By the end of the sidebar, Carroll's lawyer had only objected to a question concerning the episode, not our exhibit, and then only objected to the exhibit based on relevancy and prejudice, but again, not hearsay. After the sidebar, Trump's lawyer asked the plaintiff during cross-examination, "Miss Carroll, did you know there was a Law and Order episode from 2012 that featured a woman getting attacked in a Bergdorf Goodman lingerie dressing room?" And she said, "Yes, I'm aware." Then they showed the exhibit to Miss Carroll and she identified it. It's this email. You recognize this? Yeah. Trump's lawyers offered it into evidence. There was no objection on hearsay grounds or any other grounds. And they said, "No objection, Your Honor." And then the court said it is received. Maybe they should have objected right here. No objection. That was a bad move. Now they're trying to bring in a hearsay component to this. Trump's lawyers then published the exhibit to the jury, and they proceeded to ask Miss Carroll about it. She went on to say, "Yeah, I'm a big fan of Law and Order, but not Law and Order SVU. You know, I've watched all the other ones, but not that one," which is the most popular one, I think. She then stated that she had not seen the particular episode, but acknowledged that a frequent fantasy of television viewers is being attacked, thus explaining her comment that she was surprised that this plot is not seen more often. She also acknowledged that this plot bore, quote, "an amazing coincidence." Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? And as referenced above, she confirmed that she was aware of the episode, against which plaintiff failed to make a motion to strike based upon her purported lack of personal knowledge. Yeah. Now, days later, Carroll wishes to retract her prior no objection, sorry, and her lack of a motion to strike. She wants to patch this up with a limiting instruction. She seeks to limit our closing arguments and our testimony, saying that this is inadmissible hearsay. But her failure to make a contemporaneous, at the time, objection, and instead, in fact, said no objection, waiving any objection she might have otherwise had, she cannot be now allowed to argue to limit this material. In this regard, federal rules of evidence say the following thing. With regard to another piece of evidence, Your Honor has already made clear there is a contemporaneous objection rule for a reason, the judge said this. He probably scolded the defense. He said, "Oh, well, you didn't object on time, so therefore you get penalized." And now he's saying, "Oh, how about you apply that same standard over to Miss Carroll's side?" So he's dragging that one back up. You see this transcript here? Indeed, with regard to another piece of evidence, Your Honor already made clear to me there's a contemporaneous objection rule. They didn't object contemporaneously. Therefore, out. Plaintiff's failure to make a contemporaneous hearsay objection combined with her actual concession of, quote, no objection, allowed the exhibit to be introduced, and all subsequent objections are waived, saying here's a bunch of case law that will support my evidence, and we'll fast forward through all of that. Furthermore, Tacopina says, as to the Law and Order SVU episode, Carroll conceded that she was aware of it. She failed to make a motion to strike the aware of it comment based on her purported lack of knowledge. So actually, she does know about it, and it distinguishes the case that she tries to cite. Accordingly, her own testimony bolsters the admissibility of the exhibit. It shows her awareness of it. And this plot line could be inspired, right? This episode could have inspired this false attack allegation against the defendant. She knew about it in 2012. The allegation resurfaced in 2019, right when it was going to be useful to go and attack Trump during the election, and it's been carried over all this time. So did she watch the episode and wake up and go, oh yeah, that happened to me too? And if you tell the jury that, maybe they'll say, yeah, it sounds a little bit too similar to this whole thing. Moreover, her awareness of the episode juxtaposed against her claim not to have seen it is relevant to assess her credibility. Carroll's lawyers could have cleared up any of this confusion on redirect. They chose not to. Instead, through its instant request, they're now effectively asking the court to go back in time to redo it, and that is inappropriate. And say also, Judge, on a related note, by the way, countenancing plaintiff's untimely request after the close of evidence would prevent defendant from appropriately reacting in real time by exploring these issues further with plaintiff or with other evidence. Trump should be entitled to rely on the record as it stands today and make his case to the jury in closing. And plaintiff should not be able to rewrite history to undercut the defense. Now, they're free to argue in closing their interpretation of this. They can get out there and say, well, you can explain the SVU episode. You can have the same arguments that we can, but we can talk about it. Given the waiver of the objection, no limiting instruction should be given. Don't give them that argument. Anything else would be inappropriate and confusing. Very sincerely yours, respectfully submitted, your friend, Joseph Tacopina. Sent over to the judge, and the judge will issue a ruling on it. Now, we are going to go over and see what trial looks like. So put all of that in a bucket. We're going to go and jump into the trial thread after we get caught up on some of these other exhibits, because over the weekend, we got to see some of what the jury saw, and the exhibits have been made available. And I want to give a mega shout out to Inner City Press, and we love to shout him out. He does great work. He's got a Substack at MatthewRussellLeeICP.substack.com. He's a great Twitter follow at Inner City Press. We're going to go to him in a minute. But he filed a great motion, which is he's constantly getting these documents and these exhibits released. And he's right there on scene. So he's sort of filing right there in the courtroom, I'm expecting, and getting the documents and publishing them right there, which is awesome. Right? It's a huge service. We're grateful for his work. But I noticed that when these videos came out, a bunch of people kind of in the general mainstream media were just taking all of them, and they weren't given any credit at all. And I kind of was bummed out about that. So I wanted to give him, an extra shout out here. We're so grateful for his work, and he was able to dig these clips up, and we really couldn't be observing this trial without his work live tweeting. And so make sure you're giving him a good follow, MatthewRussellLeeICP.substack.com, and Inner City Press on Twitter. So he submitted a good filing, and he's still fighting for additional documents. Here's what he submitted on May 7th. He says, Your Honor, on May 4th, the court directed the parties to file responses about these exhibits. Nobody filed exhibits, and Miss Carroll's lawyers made some, but not all of the exhibits available on Dropbox. And Trump's team have not made any defense exhibits either. So while during the trial, defense offered a number of defense exhibits, none are included. And some of plaintiffs have also been filed, but some are not included. Our request was for all of these documents, as well as the sealed motions, including allegations against Les Moonves. Okay, so all of this stuff, we were not able to really see what's there. Exhibit AY, a spreadsheet by Candy Carroll. We want to know what's in it. Text messages involving Lisa Birnbach's Megan Tuhey, Carroll Martin, saying that this quest has become a lifestyle for her, saying it's gone to another level, right? All of these exhibits, we want them. As seemingly not yet released, there appear to be Exhibit 52. Somebody said you're going to get hurt. Matthew says these exhibits should be ordered released, including the defense. Before a verdict, the sealed motion should be docketed and unredacted. And so it's a great filing. He says, let us know if we can be made heard on this. We'll show up. Respectfully submitted. Thank you for your attention. Matthew Russell Lee at Inner City Press. So amazing. I mean, that is some really, really amazing work from him. And it's resulting in actual documents that a lot of people in the mainstream media are not getting. So amazing work from Matthew Russell Lee. Now, let's turn our attention over to the filings. Donald Trump's deposition was played for the jury, and it was very Trump. And if you like Trump, that's a good thing. But if you don't like Trump, that maybe is not a good thing. And we know we're dealing with a New York jury. So the question is, how are they going to react to the clips? There is a long version of this deposition available, but I've got 4 clips that we dragged out here. Several of these clips came over from Molly Crane and Newman. She's reporting for New York Daily News, I believe. And she clipped several of them, and another one came from Adam Klasfeld. And so let's take a look at some of these depositions. Now, this is the first one where previously in this trial, they played a clip of the locker room videotape from back in the prior election where Trump said you can just grab them by the thing. And they played that video clip, and then they played this as well.
And you say, and again, this has become very famous in this video, I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet, just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything. That's what you said, correct?
Well, historically, that's true with stars.
It's true with stars that they can grab women by the pussy?
Well, that's what it's. If you look over the last million years, I guess that's been largely true. Not always, but largely true. Unfortunately or fortunately.
And you consider yourself to be a star?
I think you can say that, yeah.
And now you said before, a couple of minutes ago, that this was just locker room talk.
It's locker room talk.
And so does that
It's
mean you
locker
didn't
room
really
talk.
mean it?
No, it's locker room talk. I don't know. It's just the way people talk.
So if you separate these statements out, it doesn't look great, right? He says that about women, and they're alleging literally, like, they take the reason why this is so bad is because they take that language and it matches E. Jean Carroll's testimony. She said this essentially, right? And so you got to imagine yourselves, if you're creating litigation to go take out Trump, one of the best ways you could do it is just to take things he's already admitted to doing in your worldview and creating a case around that, filling in the gaps with a grab, right? And so he's already on the record of talking about these things. It matches E. Jean Carroll's testimony. So when you take that clip out of context, it sounds like he's supporting or just saying it's a reality. This thing does happen. Now, if you give him the benefit of the doubt, which we're asking ourselves if the jury is going to do, just because he says this thing doesn't mean it actually happened with E. Jean Carroll. He may not have ever even been in the store with her. So it just can be a thing that you say that has nothing to do with E. Jean Carroll. Yeah, maybe it is true. Could be true. Maybe it's 100% true. Maybe Trump can go around and do that, and he's done it without consequence for however many years. But he didn't do it with E. Jean Carroll, and never in a Bergdorf's in a dressing room that she made up from a Law and Order SVU episode. So one thing has got nothing to do with the other in theory, but when you stack all of these things up one after the other, then they start to look bad, especially if the jury is already going to be predisposed and disinclined to like you. Now, for other people on the outside who know the full context of this, who understand that the two witnesses, Lisa Birnbach and Carroll Martin, both felt like weak witnesses, largely because they were removed from any follow-up. They got a weird phone call. Nobody did anything about it. E. Jean Carroll had this weird fascination with Trump. She kept watching The Apprentice. She kept posting about him on Facebook. There's a whole list of things. But the jury doesn't hear all those things. We do. We get to see what, who is funding this litigation and how George Conway set up the meeting with Roberta Kaplan. The whole thing's funded by Reid Hoffman. We get to hear all of that, but they don't get to hear any of this. So this statement is going, even though it has really nothing to do in Trump's mind with anything that ever happened in reality, it fits the exact narrative that E. Jean Carroll is saying. In fact, that's part of her direct testimony. It all started with the hands. So it's not good, right? It's not good. I don't think it's going to be good for the jury. Now, there's a little bit of, this comes back to just locker room talk, which I think is the better defense of the Hollywood tape, is to just, no, it's just locker room talk, right? This is not something that actually happens. We don't actually go around and grab women by the things. It's just locker room talk, right? Doubling down on that answer would have been a better answer, but he, I think, can make the argument that minutes ago, right? She even asks, minutes ago, that was just locker room talk. And he says, yeah, I mean, it's just how people talk. It's just kind of a thing, So it does kind of overlap or bring in his prior statement in the protection of just being locker room talk. But it's still, it by itself, I think, a difficult statement, and the jury may not make those connections. Let's listen to it again.
You consider yourself to be a star?
I think you can say that, yeah.
And now you said before, a couple of minutes ago, that this was just locker room talk.
It's locker room talk.
And so does that mean that you didn't really mean it?
No, it's locker room talk. I don't know. It's just the way people talk.
Okay. So we'll see what the jury does with that. Again, don't know why that has anything to do with E. Jean Carroll, other than that's just E. Jean Carroll's testimony. Okay. So it's he said, she said it happened in a store. She called a couple people to say something happened. A lot of other, that's basically it, right? No hard evidence, no videotapes, no personal shoppers there. We had no receipts. We don't know whether they got a calendar date from Trump, from Trump's schedule. I don't know if they subpoenaed his schedule and showed him at Bergdorf's. No surveillance footage, right? The list goes on and on. So it's E. Jean Carroll's word plus a couple phone calls, and Donald Trump's word plus an absence of evidence because he doesn't have anything to show that he wasn't a place that he wasn't, because he doesn't even have a date. We don't know what date, time this occurred. So very difficult for him to provide evidence to prove he didn't do a thing that he didn't do when you don't know when it happened. But that's what they're demanding. Now, another interesting clip here was when Trump said, she's not even my choice. And he points over to Roberta Kaplan and he says, hey, you're not either.
Say, oh, I was with Donald Trump in 1980.
Nothing changes.
I was sitting
Nothing
with him on
changes.
an airplane. And he went after me on the plane. Yeah, I'm going to go after. Believe me, she would not be my first choice, that I can tell you. Man. You don't know. That would not be my first choice.
When you said in that video that Ms. Leeds would not be your first choice, you were referring to her physical looks, correct?
Just the overall. I look at her, I see her, I hear what she says, whatever. You wouldn't be a choice of mine either, to be honest with you. I hope you're not insulted. I would not, under any circumstances, have any interest in you. I'm honest when I say it. I would not have any interest in.
So it's an interesting defense strategy, but it is a defense strategy. It's wouldn't even go near her, right? There's no reason for him to even be around her or even in the proximity of her in any way, shape, or form. And also, Roberta, you're not my type either, all right? And hope you're not offended by that. So, those are fun, funny statements. It's kind of like, man, Trump is giving it back to somebody who's being a real political pain in his butt and throwing elbows back and forth. And so as an outside external observer, it might feel good. It might feel, very satiating. But at the same time, I think a jury looks at it and they go, uh-oh, this is exactly what we thought. We're New Yorkers. We're 80% Democrat as is. And so this just confirms that we are going to vote against the guy. Now, by contrast, the opposite of this is that Trump doesn't care about the verdict on this really at all. It's just another $1 million verdict that he's got to deal with. He's going to appeal it. and he's got his eye on a bigger picture, which in this case is the presidency. So at some level, the question becomes, does Trump, well, I think the question is clear. There is no question about it. The answer is clear. Trump values being Trump and just saying the things that he wants to say and being authentically Trump much more than he will box himself into a frame that his lawyers might want him to be boxed into. And that might mean that he loses litigation, but that's a cost-benefit analysis that he's made, and he decides he's going to be open and truthful in these depositions. Here is another clip. Now, these are fun because Trump is explaining his intention, his position on this. He says the whole thing is a scam and a hoax.
This and that.
There's this ridiculous situation that we're doing right now. It's a big fat hoax. She's a liar and she's a sick person, in my opinion, really sick. Something wrong with her.
Okay. In addition to the Russia hoax, the Ukraine hoax, the Mueller hoax, the lying to FISA hoax, the lying to Congress hoax, and the spying on your campaign hoax, isn't it true that you also referred to the use of mail-in ballots as a hoax?
Yeah, I do. Sure. I do. I think they're very dishonest.
He's changed on
Mail-in
this.
ballots, very dishonest.
I think
And
now
isn't it true that you
creating
yourself have voted by mail?
I do. Sometimes I do, but I don't know what happens to it once you give it. I have no idea.
Yeah, so interesting that everything's a hoax and that he's actually flipped on that mail-in ballot position, because I think now he's organizing and developing a mail-in balloting operation, which will be useful in this next election. And so the real question comes down to credibility about E. Jean Carroll, credibility versus Trump. Here's what Trump says about E. Jean.
She actually indicated that she loved it. Okay, she loved it until commercial break. In fact, I think she said it was sexy, didn't she? It was very sexy to be raped. Didn't she say that?
So, sir, I just want to confirm, it's your testimony that E. Jean Carroll said that she loved being sexually assaulted by you?
Well, based on her interview with Anderson Cooper, I believe that's what took place. We can define that. You'll have to show that. I'm sure you're going to show that. But she was interviewed by Anderson Cooper, and I think she said that rape was sexy, which it's not, by the way. But I think she said that rape was sexy, and she actually said things that were very strange. And then she was a different person after when he said, we'll take a break right now. We're going to take a break right now. He didn't like what she was saying.
Commercial.
He was very upset with and then she came back and she was a much different woman in the second half, so to speak.
And so the question I'm asking you is, did she say in that interview that she loved being sexually assaulted by you?
Well, she said something to that effect. I mean, you'll have to take a look at the interview yourself. I believe she said rape was sexy. To which Anderson Cooper is dying. He's saying, let's get to a commercial break immediately. I think you better watch the interview. I'm sure you have. But
Yeah, we have watched the interview. In fact, I have it right over here on the mind map, spotlightlawyer.com, if you want to view some of the stuff at home. It was from day 3 here in this node. We've got this interview from her.
You don't feel like a victim?
I was not thrown on the ground and ravished, which the word rape carries so many sexual connotations. This was not sexual. It hurt.
Well, I think most people think of rape as it is a violent assault. It is not.
I think most people think of rape as being sexy.
Mm. Let's take a short break.
Think of the fantasies.
Mm. We're going to take a quick break. If you can stick around, we'll talk more on the other side.
You're fascinating to talk to.
Cut it. Yeah, so that's what Trump was referencing, and you could see what they were trying to do in that clip. They were trying to get him to say, oh, so you're saying that when you attacked her, you're acknowledging the attack and she loved the attack, you're admitting that? And he said, no, I don't know what she's talking about over there, but she said it's a sexy thing and it's not. And she said, I think people think of rape as being sexy, but I don't think it is. And so, the interview was this deposition was a back and forth between good questions and bad answers to her. I mean, relative to her, he wasn't giving her clear answers. She says, "So you're saying this?" "Well, I don't know." And he'd go off into this tangent. So it's hard to develop a call and a response pattern to any of this. But as always, the question is going to be, what does the jury think about any of it? Let's get right to the closing arguments and see where they are. We go over to the thread, courtesy of our friend Inner City Press at innercitypress.com. And here is what he says. Now, today we start with the jury charge conference. That means that they are going to be discussing some of what we've already previously discussed here with some of the letters. What are going to go in the jury instructions? What can they tell the jurors they can use as rules when they are processing and rendering a verdict? So we have the jury instructions, which will be delivered tomorrow before the jury gets the case. But today is just the hearing to decide what goes in the rules before they finalize them and give them to them tomorrow. So we start the morning with those. Judge Kaplan, all rise. All right. All right. All right, please be seated. All right. He says, all right, so we're here with the jury charge. Now, I understand there were some objections made. Some objections are made, some are sustained. Apparently, the phrase, that word looks like something belonging to a man, was included, and then finance, and then Trump. So there's some back and forth about this. Trump lawyer Brandt wants a reference to financial capacity thrown out of the instructions. And judge said no, he called himself a star. So financial means can come into this. He says, Your Honor, the Law and Order episode should come into this. We briefed this over the weekend. Sent the letter in that we read earlier. Says, I read your briefing, Mr. Brandt. I know you didn't write it, and I won't get into who did. It took liberties with the record. During Mr. Tacopina's cross, I held a sidebar, and at the sidebar, Mr. Tacopina said, so we are offering that not of the truth, but for her response. He said, that's not mentioned in your brief, not for the truth of what was said, but only for Ms. Carroll's response to that email, and we resumed testimony. And then Mr. Tacopina, so the judge is correcting the record, says, then Tacopina showed Ms. Carroll the email chain, and 2 emails were on one piece of a paper. And Tacopina said, now I offer this as an exhibit. He said it would have been helpful if the plaintiff's brief had acknowledged that. Carroll's lawyer says, I think you meant defendant, Your Honor, for the transcript. He says, yes, another correction. I said Jonathan Swift several hundred years ago. It says 7. Remember when he was vouching on behalf of E. Jean Carroll, said that that's a great point. He didn't like how that got transcribed. He said, yeah, my high school English teacher is going to be happy with that correction. Now, this concludes the charging conference. Thank you for being prepared here today. Glad we got through that quickly. I'll see you when we have the jury. And they bring in the jury. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this beautiful weekend out there. We're going to be hearing closing arguments now. It's going to take 2 hours. The defendant, a little bit more, and then a half hour further rebuttal. And then tomorrow, I'm going to instruct you on the law that we just got. 50 minutes or an hour, and 10 minutes or something like that, and then you're going to get the case. Now, it's important you understand right now. No contact with the press or social media. Understood? Jurors are nodding. Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Kaplan. Carroll's lawyer gets up. Roberta Kaplan says, ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin today with what Mr. Tacopina said. No one is above or below the law. And your job here is to uphold that. Did you notice what Mr. Trump said on his Truth Social account? We referenced this Exhibit 4. It's going to be in your packet. He insulted the entire justice system, the building that we're in, the reason we're here. Here's what he said. This Miss Bergdorf case is a total con job. Her lawyer's a political operative, and so on. posted all of that, ladies and gentlemen, threatening the work that we're doing here. Now, you haven't heard from Donald Trump in this trial, but you did hear from him in his deposition. And he said, he's not my type. He repeated that. But then we showed Donald Trump this photo. And in the photo, which is this photo here, Trump, in the deposition, pointed to this woman as his wife. He said, that looks like Marla, his ex-wife. And turns out that's E. Jean Carroll. He pointed at Miss Carroll and he said, that's Marla, my wife. Their hairdo was the same. She was exactly his type. And so he made up an excuse. He said it was blurry. It's not blurry. Now they play the Access Hollywood tape. Trump is out there. He says, grab them by their purses. You also heard, ladies and gentlemen, of Jessica Leeds here today and Natasha Stoynoff. And he said that he did exactly that to them. With Miss Carroll, he, in his words, grabbed him by the things. Now a deposition about a history of a star can do anything, and we just listened to that. He said it was fortunate that stars like him can get away with it. We had 11 witnesses. And on the other side, only Donald Trump. He didn't even bother to show up here in person. It's not he said, she said. It's what Trump said versus all the other witnesses. None of whom were there when it happened. 2 of them got phone calls. The others were made up expert witnesses and things. I'm sure they're highly credentialed. Donald Trump in this trial is a witness against himself. Let me give you an example. The doors of the dressing rooms at Bergdorf Goodman were not, as the defense claims, always locked. Here's a photo of the facility. Miss Carroll can't specify the date, but she has the details. But not really, though, because the date is a pretty important detail. Just saying. She drove to 58th and 5th Avenue. She entered on the 58th Street entrance. Through the door, she saw Donald Trump. Now, they recognized each other. He was fairly well known at the time, and he called her over. He called her E. Jean Carroll. He knew her by name. He said, oh, you're that advice lady, aren't you? We know this because Trump loves to watch TV. That's where he saw her. And he also knew her through Roger Ailes. Mr. Trump went to the New Jersey TV studio where Miss Carroll taped her show. This was before streaming and YouTube. You put the channel on, you might see a few minutes of the previous show, and for Donald Trump to see himself on Roger Ailes' show, he may have seen the end of E. Jean Carroll's show. So Trump was watching TV, and he was probably on with Roger Ailes, and then after that, he would have seen E. Jean Carroll, so he knew exactly who she was. There's a depot. Trump says, I very rarely went to Bergdorf's. And counsel says, yeah, but we had a Bergdorf employee saying he saw Donald Trump there, but not on any particular date, just at some point. He was across the street from Trump Tower. You heard how the escalators in Bergdorf Goodman are walled. You can't see out to the floor. It looks like this. This is going to be in his booklet, so make sure you're going over there and buying it in Matthew's booklet. She says, ladies and gentlemen, now this was in combination with humor and flirting, right? It was all a joke. Kind of like when Miss Carroll was a writer for SNL. Tragically, though, this stopped being funny. Things took a dark turn. Into the dressing room, the door was locked. She asked herself why she went in there. She feels embarrassed and stupid about it today. You heard from her. At that time, Donald Trump was well known as a playboy, a man about the town and not a predator. So she had no idea, but he pounced. She pushed back. She weighed 120 pounds and he had at least 100 pounds more on her. She tried to hit him with her purse, but Trump pinned her down, pulled down her tights, and grabbed her by the thing. She says, I apologize for my language. But then he put it in. And afterward, she told Lisa Birnbach and Carroll Martin. Lisa, when she was testifying here today, she told you that E. Jean was hyperventilating on the phone. And both Carroll and Lisa told you that they believed, and they believe her to this day. E. Jean Carroll has not had a relationship since. No walking the dog together. Oh, no one to watch TV with. The public, E. Jean did not show this pain, though. She went on a road trip and news broke about Harvey Weinstein. She conducted interviews. It was weeks before she decided to include Donald Trump in her book. An excerpt was published in New York Magazine. But Trump did more than deny it. Trump attacked her from the White House, called her a liar. She lost her job at Elle and the trust of her readers. She started sleeping with a loaded gun in her bed, and she filed a lawsuit. But that did not stop him. In October 2022, Mr. Trump doubled down. You heard from expert Leslie Leibowitz that people remember traumatic events in strange ways, some details and not others. She told you Miss Carroll suffered the blame. Now, Mr. Tacopina tried to imply that there's something wrong with Miss Carroll, having tried to continue on to have a happy life and to open her Substack. Why is Mr. Trump trying to blame Miss Carroll for these things? He argues that a victim must act like a victim. They play more. Trump in his deposition claimed that Miss Carroll loved it, said she told Anderson Cooper that it was sexy. They play the clip that we just played. Says E. Jean actually said that that's how rape is portrayed in popular culture, in Game of Thrones, for example. The witnesses here have not hatched any conspiracy. If there was a conspiracy, why would Carroll Martin criticize E. Jean Carroll in writing to a friend? You also heard Jessica Leeds and Natasha Stoynoff. Leeds was assaulted on an airplane, and she didn't tell anybody either. In 2016, Leeds saw Trump running for president, saw him deny these assaults. And Stoynoff in 2005 had been in Mar-a-Lago, and Trump used his same MO. Closed the door, pinned her against the wall. The pattern here is clear, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Trump says he doesn't shop at Bergdorf's, but that was a lie. He said he didn't meet Miss Carroll, but that was a lie. He said she was not his type, but confused her with Marla Maples. He lied and said professionally taken photo was blurry. He lied about Ailes. He had appeared on TV with Ailes. They were friends in '95. Donald Trump is lying, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow morning, Judge Kaplan will tell you about the law. He's told you this is not a criminal case. It's a civil case. If he's liable, he's not going to jail. The law allows you to compensate E. Jean Carroll. I'm not going to tell you how much. On behalf of our team, thank you. The judge says, can I see you guys at a sidebar real fast? End of closing arguments for the plaintiff. Now they have lunch and they resume, and we're back. And you say, Your Honor, before we bring the jury back in here, quick issue. Well, we've reviewed the slides for Mr. Tacopina's closing, and there's a slide about George Conway. And he says, Your Honor, while we're waiting for the slide, could I say something? He says, no, I want to see the slide first. And George Conway, we know well, he is in the Trump mind map at spotlightlawyer.com/Trump. He's this fellow, way over here, part of the build team that launched this litigation assault against Trump. Former husband to Kellyanne Conway, who used to work with Trump. Same guy who met with E. Jean Carroll at a party that was being hosted by this woman named Molly Jongfast, podcaster. And she set up apparently an invite. George Conway was there. E. Jean Carroll was there. They had a conversation. George Conway says, wow, you're a perfect litigant. I hate Donald Trump. I'm looking any way for anybody to sue him. What kind of claim do you have? Great. Connected her with Roberta Kaplan, the lawyer who is now representing her. Go figure. And the whole thing's being funded by Reid Hoffman. Or I don't know what percentage of this is being funded by him, but we do know that a portion of it is, because a letter came out from Roberta Kaplan's team over to Alina Abba. So it's all interconnected. So he wants to reference that, Mr. George Conway, in his closing argument. Seems reasonable, because if this litigation is about political bias, then it's not about recovering for a victim. And if all of these people have a history of political bias, maybe we have an opportunity to explain that to the jury. Let's see what the judge says. Tacopina says, I do not intend to argue that Miss Kaplan is part of a Democratic conspiracy. I simply want to say that Mr. Conway introduced Miss Carroll to an attorney. He says it's obvious we're the lawyers. He says, okay, we'll take the slide out. All right. So the slide goes out. So much for the 45-minute lunch break. Get the jury. Jury's back. We're back here for closing arguments. Judge says, Mr. Tacopina. He says, thank you, Your Honor. Walks up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, the last hour and a half was hard for me to listen to. Miss Kaplan is a fine lawyer and she's great, but she took a lot of liberties here. And today we're going to take a journey to justice. Says people have passionate feelings about Donald Trump. Let's just get that out of the way. But this courtroom is not the place to express it. That's for the ballot box. You have the opportunity to express that there. Just like no one's above the law, no one is below the law either. And if you apply the law to the facts of this case, justice will be served very quickly. Very quickly. Why do I say that? Because Miss Carroll has abused the system. She brought a case for money, and in doing so has victimized the real victims, exploiting their pain and their suffering for her own personal gain. And ladies and gentlemen, we cannot let her profit from her abuse of this process. I'm going to pull this all together. We're going to go through this piece by piece. He says, Miss Kaplan said, maybe Mr. Trump met Miss Carroll at a TV studio in New Jersey. Maybe. Or maybe he saw a rerun. Maybe the door was open. I'm going to play you his denial. Trump said in his deposition, it didn't happen. If it had, it would have been reported within minutes. Never happened. They play the deposition. Never happened. Now they put up another exhibit. He says, how do you prove a negative? If Donald Trump had come into this trial, what could I have asked him? About some unknown date? This is a civil case. They could have called Donald Trump if they wanted to, but they didn't. They just wanted you to hate him enough and take it from there. Why did they call Candy Carroll, E. Jean's sister, to say that their dad told them to smile? Interesting. Well, it was all meant to distract you from E. Jean Carroll's story. Those other women have nothing to do with it. They have no legal claim for you to hear. Miss Leeds says she was assaulted on a plane. Miss Leeds says she didn't tell her boss because she didn't want to complain about the rigors of travel. Are you kidding me? She says Donald Trump called her the C word from an airplane in front of his wife. She was enraged in front of her TV. And Miss Stoynoff, she was here too. I did ask her, I said, do you have anything for this jury to decide, anything here for them, or any reason you're here today? How many times did they play the Access Hollywood tape here in this trial? 5 times? Donald Trump said, women, let you do it. Let you do it. Yes, it was crude. He apologized for it in a debate, and it's old news. But they play it for you over and over. Why is that? It's because they're using the art of distraction. They're trying to take parts of Donald Trump you hate and stretch them over her story. If this weren't about Trump, we wouldn't be here today. No way. Here's the email up on your screen about the Law and Order episode. What does Miss Carroll say? That this kind of thing happens all the time? All the time? Attacks in a lingerie changing room at Bergdorf Goodman's all the time? It's a common plot theme? Give me a break. Carroll's lawyer objects. Your Honor, you issued an order about this very issue yesterday, I think. He says, yesterday? That's Sunday. The heck are you talking about? He says, I apologize. We wrote about it yesterday. He says, well, the email about the alleged Law and Order episode was received only for your ability. Oh, he gives them an instruction. Was received only for your ability to assess Miss Carroll's response to the email. So he's saying you can only use this to assess her response. But the instruction, which is about limiting whether or not the episode actually exists. I know how stupid this sounds, okay? But it's what the judge ruled. The jury is only to read the email with an understanding of Carroll's response, but the subject of the email, which is about the Law and Order SVU episode, is not real. Just make believe it doesn't exist, jury. But what is she writing the email about? What's all this it's about the episode. You mean the episode that doesn't exist? Exactly. Well, what am I supposed to be reading it for? To see how Carroll responded? Yeah, to the Law and Order episode. Yeah, but that doesn't exist. Okay, so all of that is going in front of them. And Tacopina says, okay, so the whole story is an unbelievable work of fiction. Miss Carroll used that word, unbelievable. And according to Miss Carroll, the 6th floor of Bergdorf Goodman was like The Walking Dead, the TV show. No one there at all. Now, I come from regular stock. It offended me when they said sales clerks cannot be trusted to follow the rules. I didn't take kindly to that. Said Miss Carroll has to reverse engineer her story. Then there's this physical attack she alleges too. How does Mr. Trump unzip while he's hitting him with her bag in 4-inch heels? So they have a hired gun, Dr. Leibowitz. They bring her in. She's what, $6.50 an hour? He says she's not credible at all. Then there's the camp counselor. We also had Dr. Leibowitz. She has no independent knowledge at all. She just came in here, a hired gun, garbage in, garbage out. You give her a bunch of stuff. She just regurgitates it, Trump, and then spits it right back out in front of you. Miss Carroll never told Dr. Leibowitz her editor at Elle loathed her for selling her excerpt to the New York Mag. Didn't tell her. Miss Carroll didn't tell Dr. Leibowitz that she was, quote, a massive fan, her words, of The Apprentice. Dr. Leibowitz gave an example of a Vietnam vet who had a reaction to the smell of Vietnamese food. Miss Carroll, no response. She watches The Apprentice. She likes the show. I asked her, I said, did you joke around about having sex with Trump for money on your Facebook account? She said, yeah, I did on Facebook. Here's our defense exhibit. Tacopina continues. He says, Miss Carroll wrote under her Facebook post, not taking off the orange jumpsuit until Weinstein, Spacey, and certain other hideous men are in jail. Here's defense exhibit. Carroll is talking about women down at the border getting attacked around the clock. Tacopina says there was no border crisis in the mid-1990s. You know why she didn't go to the police? Oh, I get it. Yes. Carroll was saying, I didn't report anything because other people were getting attacked. But there was no border crisis back in the mid-90s. You know why she didn't go to the police? Because they would have investigated. A civil case is easy. There is no investigation. But here, there was no diary entry. She said she only writes about throwing the ball to the dogs. That's all she writes about. No, ladies and gentlemen, this was about selling her book. She claimed she didn't know what a signing bonus was. That was just wrong. She swore to tell you the truth, and she didn't. She had a watch party for her lawsuit like it was the NFL draft. Speaking to the dudes on the jury. She said status is important to her. Tacopina plays the Anderson Cooper interview all the way up to we have to take a break and you're fascinating to talk to. And then says to the juries, you decide what that means. In this case, most of her crying was on direct examination. Joe says, Tacopina says, I'm the father of 2 daughters. I would never tell an attack victim what she should do. It's that she asked herself that question about not screaming. She became a star. After the CNN interview, she told friends that she was having a wonderful time. She said she got her revenge on Elle magazine with her new Substack. She said, "I'm back, so long, Elle." And let's consider their reputational harm expert. Not that she matters. She didn't even weigh in on Miss Carroll's work on her own reputation. And she had a political motivation. She did. That was Ashley Humphreys, who signed the letter with 1,000 other so-called business professors who all said that Trump was a menace to the republic. He says, they also took this out of her book because it went too far. He's trying to kill me and poison my air. Took that out of her book. I asked her, I said, hey, did you write that Donald Trump was trying to kill you and poison your air? Did you say that in your initial draft? She wrote, why isn't an attack allegation worthy of impeachment? All of this showed political bias. Tacopina continues. He says, Lisa Birnbach, Miss Birnbach got up here on the stand and told you she thinks Donald Trump should be held accountable for what he has done politically. She's tried to hold him accountable. And E. Jean Carroll is now giving her that opportunity. Carol Martin said she wasn't even asked to remain silent. They play another exhibit on the screen. Don't know why it's not being released. Lisa Birnbach, ladies and gentlemen, said she needed Carol's permission to think about it. Think about this stuff. Then there's this story with the envelopes with the blue ribbon, and Miss Birnbach said she didn't open it or read it because it sounded heavy. And she's a writer. Does that make sense? So the New York Times reporter, Megan Toohey, is going to interview the two. Miss Carroll tells them to say that they never read the chapter because it might seem like they got the story from the chapter. Miss Carroll was lying to you about this too. Apparently they were just work friends until the book came out. But we're supposed to believe that Miss Carroll called Lisa Birnbach and essentially dictated the chapter from her book with details like a revolving door and you're the advice lady, right? All those details. Says Miss Carroll never intended to sue until Mr. Conway told her to seriously think about it. First, she told me and you, ladies and gentlemen, no. But from her deposition, she said, wherever I went, people said, are you going to sue him? And I said no. And then George said, you should. Now here's the scheming email, the scheme mail about Nambia. I asked Miss Carroll about this. The other journalist, the friend, well, I don't know which one he's talking about. Miss Carroll is the defendant, not Carol Martin. She said she had no idea what this email was about. But suddenly she remembers 27 years ago, revolving doors and hats. She says a scheme means a plan. No, it doesn't. Let's try using that in a sentence. Let's scheme to go get pizza. Let's scheme to go to the Yankees game. It doesn't work, okay? It just doesn't make sense. Then when Miss Martin, Carol Martin, the other journalist, knows they'll be subpoenaed, she writes no more text and chats until further notice. That's weird. Why would she say, now that she knows she's going to be under subpoena and all of this is going to be public, no more texts and chats until further notice? That's cryptic talk, isn't it? That's not how people who have nothing to say talk. Now something lethal to them, a message, trying to thread the needle. Carol Martin said to her friend about E. Jean Carroll, it's gone to another level. She's going to sue Trump. WTF, I can't relate to it. That's it. Game, set, and match. It's gone to another level. She's going to sue Trump. WTF, I can't relate to it. He says, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's game, set, and match. Miss Carroll made this up from a Law and Order episode. She brought Miss Birnbach and Miss Martin along with this, and they got in too deep and they couldn't get out. Folks, I'm coming to an end here, but let me just show you a chart. It's a timeline. Trump is elected. Then this story just comes up out of nowhere. Miss Carroll goes on her trip, writes her book mid-July 2019. George Conway suggests litigation. Objection! Jury disregards that sentence. He said, I only said, I've already ruled on that, Judge. Carroll says, take down the slide. He says, okay, we removed it. He says, I want to see what was removed. The slide's back up now. The slide is jumping to a November 2019 lawsuit. then Miss Martin's message about WTF, then about getting together before her deposition. Tacopina says, so let's go back to the beginning, back to the 2012 Law and Order episode. Objection sustained. He says, that's her testimony, Judge. He says, that's your version. He says, the judge says, one more word. He says, okay. So he moves on. He says, ladies and gentlemen, the political hatred, it was clear here. Attack, WTF, never refer to Donald Trump as the attacker. Objection sustained. He says, okay, I'm sitting down. They have the burden, ladies and gentlemen, and they can't carry it. Facts are stubborn things. Says E. Jean Carroll was not attacked at Bergdorf Goodman. And we know reality from fiction. She is asking you to condemn another citizen as an attacker. The worst thing you could ever be called on evidence that couldn't stand up in any credible investigation whatsoever. This is an absolutely outrageous case, ladies and gentlemen. She had a political reason. She desired status and sucked her friends in. What about the rules of law? It's everything for us. On the facts, this is your courtroom. Just you. Not some journalist who comes in for a day. Objection. On what basis? Talking about journalists. Yeah, I'm summing up. He says, ladies and gentlemen, have the courage to do what's right here. Thank you. Says jurors, okay, we're going to take 20 minutes. I'll see you back here in about 20. Jury leaves. Now the judge says, okay, for the draft transcript, he's pulling it up. He says, Mr. Tacopina said, WTF never said Trump is an R in the messages. A new slide was projected to the jury. He says, I want the withdrawn slide in the transcript or the record. And we may want to amend the instruction based on what was said. He said, Your Honor, these slides were already given to them with the exact things that were shown to the jury. I respect you. And he says, hey, stop it. The quote you took from testimony omits the lines that put it in a different light. What page of the transcript was it from? He said, page 575. He says, yeah, on 571, she said she was aware. She may have meant aware of the email, not the episode. Kaplan says, we had to look at the thumb drive, whatever you call it, so there was no waiver. And the jury's back. And now we get our second close from the plaintiffs. And here's what they say. Jury's back seated. The judge says, Mr. Ferreira, floor is yours. And this is Carroll's lawyer, Mr. Ferreira. Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard Tacopina say, who could you call as a witness? It's a little late, but Donald Trump. He never looked you in the eye. Lisa Birnbach and Carroll Martin are journalists. Their careers are based on trust. The defense wants you to believe they lied. They did not. The defense wants you to believe the other bad things have happened to Miss Carroll. That's true too. Now let's look at Miss Martin's email. You'll recall, ladies and gentlemen, that Miss Carroll published her account in 2019. Mr. Trump was elected after the Access Hollywood video. Why is this important? America voted for Trump, despite adhering it. So what about the scheme? They are so stupid they need to steal from L&O? Why would people turn over damning messages if they were willing to perjure themselves? So these prove nothing. Let's step back. The Trump's team theory is that 3 intelligent women based their scheme on an episode of TV that 6 million people have seen. They could have made up a more private place than a department store. They could have seen Miss Carroll scream. They didn't. This happened. If Trump claims he wasn't there, why ask why she didn't scream? The denials are lies. So by defending the case, he's admitting he was there. She didn't scream, therefore that means he did it, or he was there. If their defenses conflict with each other, it means they have no defense. We have carried our burden. If someone accused you of this and you didn't do it, you'd run to the courtroom and talk? No, that's bad advice. Mr. Trump didn't come. Miss Carroll was here every day. says Mr. Trump attacked Miss Carroll and didn't want to testify about it. Mr. Tacopina said garbage in, garbage out with our expert witnesses, but she's a specialist and she believed Miss Carroll. And on Mr. Conway, Mr. Tacopina called him a Democratic Party lawyer, but he's a Republican. Miss Carroll said, it's not about the money. It's about getting my name back. If she was all about the money, why wouldn't she tell you? Why would she tell you she wasn't? The defense said it's a lie. They didn't read the book, but they were interviewed together. And so let's talk about the Access Hollywood tape. I'm not going to play it again, but Trump never said it wasn't true. It was a confession. It was not just locker room talk. I've been in a locker room and I've never heard about furniture shopping. I'll move on her like a bitch is what he said. In the video, he says, just like in Bergdorf's, grab them by their genitals. That's not locker room talk. When Donald Trump says it, he did it. In their version, a perfect victim burns their clothes, never laughs again, never tries to hold their attacker accountable. It's the defense's out-of-date view. It's wrong as well as it is offensive. 3 Trump victims told you the same thing. And Trump needs you to believe that all these people are liars. He needs you to believe that he was lying on the Access Hollywood tape. There wasn't even a he said situation. He didn't even come and say he said anything. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please find him liable. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you're done for the day. Thanks for being here. Come back tomorrow at 10 a.m. You'll get the case with further instructions. Nothing else from the defense, nothing else from the lawyers. So the judge excuses everybody for the day, and we are done. Closing arguments in Trump trial come to a close. We have now, tomorrow, to hand the case off to the jury, and it will be very curious to see what they do with this. I had a couple different things I wanted to highlight. You know, the plaintiff, the government, they often get additional closes. And so why don't we just spend a little bit more time on our version of a rebuttal close. But here were some of the notes that I thought were pertinent about this case as we've been following along. There was very little hard evidence in this case at all. Remember, no surveillance tapes, no physical Trump evidence, anything that men leave behind after situations like this. No doctors, injuries, therapists in the immediate aftermath. No other witnesses that put Trump there at the same time as E. Jean Carroll. We heard about personal shoppers. There was nobody there who was assigned to Trump who testified that he ever came in. No receipts, no dress that was apparently kept was submitted. No surveillance tapes, nothing. Nothing was there. And so all we got was her testimony and evidence of phone calls being made. When there is no specific date, you cannot defend yourself. How can you possibly say I was not there if you don't know what date it was? A big question I had was whether they ever went through Donald Trump's calendar, either the defense or the plaintiffs, and articulated that he was not on or in a Bergdorf's on a Thursday at any time during those 2 years. Would be very interesting to see if they got into that. But there was a question about why she didn't go to the police after all of these years. She did go to her friends, but there was a split verdict there, and both of them were extremely nonchalant about their friend, so-called, being attacked in the immediate aftermath. The story was very strange. We saw it resembled Law and Order, as though it's almost inspired by Law and Order. She didn't keep anything in her personal journal. She didn't tell any family member about it at all, and they all just kind of went along thinking life is hunky-dory. She was infatuated by Trump, calling it a funny story at first, kept watching The Apprentice, kept the dress after being ashamed of it, turned her whole career essentially into a Trump prosecution, got up to 19,000 people on Substack as a result of it, has said many times that rape is sexy and that this didn't feel like that, and then suddenly claims that it is that, then said that Trump almost joked about sleeping with him on Facebook for $17,000. Bizarre stuff. Had other accusations against many other men that were never brought forward. Les Moonves, Jack Johnson, the camp counselor that we never heard from. The initiation of the lawsuit was as bizarre as can be. They created this Adult Survivors Act and created a new window with a look-back period, which they could then use to prosecute Trump, and they did that. 1 year of a possibility to file new claims, all done after shopping, basically plaintiff shopping, to go find a person who had a valid claim, met with George Conway, all funded by Reid Hoffman. And Reid Hoffman and other people who say that they are supporting this because they care about victims of abuse were later discovered to have gone down to Epstein Island to hang out with him after he was convicted for the crimes that he was convicted for. Major structural problems with this case. It's going to be a Southern District of New York jury, obviously. Donald Trump's team didn't present any evidence. That's always not a good thing. You always want to have something to present, unless you have nothing to present. And in this case, if you just put all evidence on scales, they said a bunch of stuff and they didn't say anything, even though he had nothing to say. So it's hard to win cases like that in this situation. The judge was very aggressive against Trump's defense, telling them to move along. We heard it today many times, cutting them off, ruling against them, vouching for Carroll, telling them we can all do math, and said that there was a reason, they can reference a reason why Trump didn't come in and testify, saying that he's not here. They commented on it to the jury. And so it's going to be a difficult case. Now, Trump has already been laying out the framework for an appeal. We saw and covered this letter at length. It was an excellent letter by Joe Tacopina at the early stages of the trial that detailed more about some of the structural problems, the objection problems that have been happening. And we'll see what the appeals court does. If this verdict comes back against Trump, we will see. The jury will be handed the case tomorrow. And of course, we will continue to cover it. But thank you for joining us as we dug into it. Now, let's hear from you. And let's say hello to our great friends on YouTube, on Rumble, on Locals, on Twitter, before we wrap it up on this beautiful day. And I saw that we had some new members who made it in, which is awesome. Who do we have? Patrick Parker. Patrick Parker. Thank you, Patrick. Patrick invited What About Me, Don't Mind Me, Mr. Null, Laura, and Common Sense in the house. And Dolphin Fan. Dolphin Fan also brought in Irene, Kumi, Third, Anthony, Vanessa. Amazing. Thank you, Dolphin Fan, and thank you to Patrick Parker. Our membership is getting bigger and bigger every day. Very grateful for those of you who are bringing new people in. And we do morning headlines shows. We talk about the headlines and a little bit more casual conversations about other topics that we can't get into here. And so welcome aboard, everybody. And thank you to Dolphin and Patrick. And Tony, hey, Munkets also became a member. And we're super grateful for everybody who is here. Thank you for those. Okay. And Patrick Parker got us started with a nice question here with a nice super chat, in addition to inviting some new members in the house. Says, and why is the jury looking at this after being told not to until after the trial? So the jury is being told to not look at anything outside of the trial until after the trial. So a lot of the stuff that we were talking about, the deposition, all of the charts, emails, all of that are admitted as exhibits. And so they are allowed to look at those things, but they can't look at anything outside. Like they can't look on their phone and read an article about anything else, essentially. So thank you, Patrick, for that. Great question. Insight of the Ages says, are they just exploiting mentally ill women to make these accusations? Being convinced of things that didn't happen? I mean, she's an interesting woman. I don't know if she's mentally ill, but Trump says she's sick. And Anderson Cooper was a little bit taken aback by her. Strange. Yeah. Fred Petamonte's in the house. Says Schumer, literally on the steps of the Supreme Court, threatened Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. Yeah, he says the whirlwinds will be coming for you. Then protesting the assassination attempt, but no sanction of Schumer? WTF, Rob? Yeah, no, not at all. He's part of a favored class of defendants, and Schumer obviously would not be prosecuted, but people can threaten. There's a protected class of people who can threaten Supreme Court judges and do all sorts of other mayhem and get away with it. that's just the new justice system, unfortunately. Good to see you, Fred. And give Johnny our best. Woods Precision Arms is in the house. Says Trump's trial judge answer to everything. The defense says, how about no? Yeah. Title IX. Illegal. I cracked myself up, says Woods Precision's Arms. Yeah, it's pretty much right. It's pretty much right. Your Honor, I would like to, no. It's like that scene out of Austin Powers, like zip it, zip, zip, zip. No. Overruled. Constantly. It's a lot. Good to see you, Woods. Voice of the People says, George Conway also said they crossed the Rubicon when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago. It's not someone they should be referencing for their case. Well, George, I don't know. It's hard for me to gauge who you're saying should not be referencing their case. I think that Trump was referencing George Conway as being an architect of this lawfare litigation. And if he's saying they crossed the Rubicon, I would agree with him that raiding Mar-a-Lago is crossing the Rubicon, that they are crossing lines and breaking historical precedent that we haven't seen before. This is a whole new game that we're playing. Hey, Zulu's here, says, my understanding from People's expert insider jury analysis is that the jury is certainly irreparably biased. Why would anything Trump's lawyers could introduce make a difference? Well, I think that there's some truth to that, Zulu. I think you're being facetious on that one, but I do think there is some truth to that. I mean, in certain situations, there may not be anything that they can do in this case. I mean, we have seen the judge shut down the defense many times. We have a whole list of things that never got admitted, can't hardly talk about. You can read Joe Tacopina's letter, and he talked to, every single, one of these things might be an appealable issue, and I think that they will appeal it. You present evidence because you hope a juror hears your side and they stand in the way of things, but I'm not sure. You also have to weigh the risks. What happens if you do bring Donald Trump in and you have him testify? I don't think that would be good for a whole variety of reasons, because it's hard to prove a thing that didn't happen with no specifics about the thing. Like, Trump can't call witnesses and then bring them on and say, Trump called me and told me he didn't attack her or something. It's because it doesn't exist, because he wouldn't have made the phone call. So I guess, Zulu, this is an interesting issue. What happens if we have this litigation that continues forward? It's like lawfare, and it doesn't really matter what you do. You're not going to get a fair shake because the juries are so politically biased one way or the other. And scary time for the justice system, to be perfectly clear. And when judges just allow it to go on like it's normal, I don't think that bodes well. Curtis Bartle says, but thank you, Zulu. Curtis says, why can't the jury just go make their mind up now and not have to come back? It's probably close to the end of the day. They've got families and, I don't know, probably kids and responsibilities and stuff. So they'll let them go, and then they'll come back in the morning and they'll go through it all again. Kevlar, also here, thank you, Kevlar, says, it's so obvious she's in it for the money, fame, and politics. Do you think the jury can figure that out? I highly doubt it. I doubt it. Yeah, I'm not optimistic on the outcome on this case, to be perfectly honest about it. But Trump will appeal it, and it's a money situation, so we'll see what the damages look like at some point. The bigger issue is going to be whether other litigation moves forward. Now that one has fallen, are there any other potential litigants that might jump into the fray? Hey, Riley's here. Says, my boy Bobby GGGG unit, doing big things, rocking it on Megyn Kelly today. You were absolute professional. Much love from Utah. Thank you, Riley. Yeah, we had a nice little interview with Megyn Kelly today. It was a ton of fun. She's got a great channel. We talked about Jordan Neely. We talked about this case for about 25 minutes. I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know if it's any good or not. But it's available over on her website, on her YouTube channel, which you should subscribe to because she does great work. And she had a good segment on the Tucker stuff this morning. She had some good details about what's going on with Tucker and about possibly going to declare a boycott and also, basically go to war. So thank you for the nice comment, Riley. I had fun. Those are always good experiences. You know, they're new, kind of push me out of my comfort zone a little bit. I'm like sitting here like sweating, stressed out. And then, you know, you just go do the thing. So thanks for the nice feedback. I had a lot of fun. She's extremely good and extremely smart. And what they do is very impressive. So thank you for sending that in, and go check it out. It was a fun conversation. Good stuff. All right, let's do a refresh and see what else. Hey, Voice of the People says, became a member, says, make sure you give the like button. It's acquittal. Definitely do that. Thank you, Voice of the People, for sending that one in. Very much appreciate that. We had this one. Hey, Chappaquiddick Drinker over on Rumble became a monthly supporter. Woo! You can do that on Rumble now? That's amazing. So welcome. Chappaquiddick Drinker is a member on Rumble. Monthly supporter. Thank you for doing that. Says, wasn't there a conscious decision for Trump not to come to trial because of the huge disruption to the city? Yeah, and thus the deposition. Is it okay then to torch him for not showing up? Both lawyers in closing. Yeah, so you can in a civil case. You know, in a criminal case, you can't comment on somebody who is exercising their right to remain silent. You can say, no, you know, that's why we advise people not to, although this is not legal advice to anybody in particular, general advice is to not talk to the cops because they can't comment on that. And generally speaking, but in a civil case, you can. You can say, well, there's no, I forget how the phrasing is, but you can draw an inference that there is no innocent explanation for the conduct. It's something like that. You can draw an inference that there is no innocent explanation for the conduct. I think that will probably be in the jury instructions that they'll be charged with tomorrow. So yeah, they can hit them up on it. You know, we were playing around with this idea. What if Donald Trump does come in and testify? It would be a total, you know, mess for the place, but I think they would deal with it. And I think that there would be more to lose than to gain from Trump going in and testifying because we really don't know what he would say. And so his lawyers would really not like that to happen. And then he would be subject to cross-examination, and they don't want that to happen. So it's just a better thing that he's not there. Now, that might change in his he's got a criminal trial, you know, potentially coming up here with this Alvin Bragg saga. So it just keeps going and going and going. Yes, and thank you. Donut Mind Me is helping out with these super chats today. Donut Mind Me, thank you very much. Okay, but I think that is it, my friends, from our Rumble friends and from our YouTube friends. Let's say hello to Twitter before we wrap it up. We are going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com for our after party. And if you're a YouTube member who just joined us, click the community tab, download the Telegram link, and join us. Let's see who's on Twitter. Is anybody? Whoa, we've got 16 viewers. That's out of control, man. That's double digits. Is something broken? Is something break on Twitter? How did this happen? I have no idea. We have this one from Danny McWilliams showing Lady Liberty vomiting. We have this one from Danny, says there's no justice. James Pepper says this is depressing to see the legal system go to its lowest depths. Chicago ladies here says nobody does it better than Robert. Well, thank you, Chicago. That's so nice of you to say. I think a lot of people do, you know, much better, but that's nice of you to say. Just Waiting says, I hope the jury can see this is all a sham. We'll see. We'll see about that. And thanks to everybody who's watching on Twitter. We love to support our free speech platforms, and we love to see it continue to grow. 16, out of control. Pretty amazing day. So thanks for everybody watching on Twitter. But okay, my friends, I think that is it for us on the day. As I mentioned, if you are a member, don't forget to join us. We are having our after party here in a short minute. And so we will leave it right there. But remember, before we get out of here, if you would like to join us on our community, watchingthewatchers.locals.com is the place to go. We'd love to see you there. And also, don't forget to get your Field of Greens. They've got all sorts of new stuff over there. They've got a new product called Lean as well to lean you up a little bit. And so we'll start talking about that one, as well as stuff for sleep, stuff for joints, really good stuff. fieldofgreens.com, save 15% with code Robert. Remember that the vegetables, they want to be eaten. That's why they're here. Okay, they pop out of the ground. They're full of nutrients. And look at them, they're dancing too. So just eat them up, and you don't even have to make it complicated. Get yours, fieldofgreens.com, and save 15% with code Robert. Also, if you love mind maps, as I do, as you can tell, you can get your own account at spotlightlawyer.com/mindmap, free account, add in GIFs and or GIFs, videos, PDFs, everything you need. I love this tool. spotlightlawyer.com/mindmap if you want to create your own account. Now, we've got our mods and meme smiths in the house. Let's start from the bottom today. We got locals. Shout out to Geegum Geegum. We have Sleepy Dog Lee, who I saw over on Twitter as well. What's up, Donut? Mind me. We've got the Dog Digger in the house. We've got Janek. We've got John Allen here. We've got Zach Nichols. Geomancy Zulu's in the house. We saw Ronnie playing hooky, Just Cause, K-Bean, and I think it's game night, which means Zulu's here. Vientikis is on game night, I think, or he's doing something, you know, without us today, which I guess is okay. But that, my friends, is it for us on the day. We are going to come back tomorrow. We're going to see, we might have a verdict tomorrow on the Trump trial. And so thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking this wherever it is you're watching it. We will be here to do it all again. I hope to see you right back here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.